are preparing to move out to a homestead, there are several things that you can do in order to get ready for it, and a lot of those things occur inside of the kitchen. You definitely need to know how to prepare the food from scratch that you have been growing and harvesting. You need to know how to preserve, and there's many different preserving methods. And one of those methods is fermentation. And one of the simplest and easiest ways to start with fermentation is sourdough. Sourdough is kind of like the pet that you never know that you wanted, but makes delicious, tasty bread and crackers and stuff for you. So this is living organism. It is yeast and the food that it feeds on, which is gluten and water. All it needs to survive is moisture and warmth and a little bit of flour at least once a day. So to start this, you can either buy a culture online just by Googling Sourdough Starter. And you can find starters that you can purchase from companies, reputable companies. You can also get some from a friend or a relative. Some sourdough starters are hundreds of years old. And if you'd like some of my sourdough starter, I would be more than happy to dehydrate some of it for you and send it to you. Just reach out to me. And then we could be sourdough cousins. And you and me could be making the same types of things from the same type of sourdough starter. Now, you can also start it yourself just with some yeast and some water and some flour. You can find directions for that online as well. There's plenty of great tutorials on how to do that. And you feed it a little bit of water and flour every day and stir it up. And then whenever you're not going to use it, you either dehydrate it for long-term storage, freeze it for long-term storage, or you put it in the refrigerator for short-term storage. I usually put mine in the refrigerator after feeding it on Sunday from Monday to Thursday, and then Thursday I get it back out, let it come to room temperature, feed it again. Some of the benefits of using a sourdough starter are that you have less gluten in the things that you make from it. It has a lower glycemic index, so it's good for people who are sensitive to sugars. It is also a fermented food, so it helps to absorb better nutrients from the food that you're consuming. Overall, it's a good alternative to traditionally bought breads and crackers. Now that brings me to what you can make from it. You can make lots of stuff. We make, and you and me will be making together as well, bread, our everyday sandwich bread, artisan loaves, so something fancy to go with a nice fancy dinner. We make pasta with it, we make crackers with it, we make biscuits with it, we make anything that you would use flour, we make it from the sourdough starter. So I wanted to at least introduce you to the concept of it in case it's something new to you, but also invite you to reach out to me so that I can send you some of my sourdough starter in case that's something you'd like to do along with us, because that is something that I'm going to be making lots of things from this in the future. Another food preservation method that I actually do not have an example of right now is you can preserve things in oil like garlic or tomatoes. I had mentioned the sun-dried tomatoes in olive oil before. That is definitely something you can do. You can also preserve things in alcohol, like my homemade vanilla. So this is just vanilla beans and vodka, and the vanilla beans never go bad because it's in a nice clean state inside of that vodka, and it just sits here and gets richer and richer and makes the most delicious vanilla extract for me for my cooking needs. And then another way is you can actually preserve things in honey. A lot of people don't realize it, but honey is very antimicrobial, antibacterial. It keeps oxygen out of things. There have been finds in ancient Egypt where they found food preserved in honey. And that's definitely something you can do. I've never really done it personally, but the honey that is preserving garlic, the garlic preserved honey, that looks really interesting. That's definitely something we should try. I hear it's really great for colds and coughs to add to your teas and stuff during the cold and flu season. And that's definitely something we should take a look at, and very interesting. So that's another preservation method that is available to you while you're waiting to get to your homestead as well. So another preservation method that is really handy is dehydration. And you don't even have to have a fancy dehydrator to do this. You can do it in an oven. In fact, a lot of the newer ovens are coming with dehydration settings on them. And all dehydration is a very low temperature oven, a convection oven essentially. That's what a dehydrating machine is. There's also freeze drying as well. I do not have a freeze dryer. They are a little expensive, to be honest with you, and I would like to try one eventually at some point, because that does look like a really interesting preservation method. Dehydration has a tendency to bring out the sweetness in things, so I really like it for more of a fruit. We call them a dehydrator or snack maker, because we do make a lot of snacks in it. Just this week I made plantains, and these are chili lime plantains. So I just cut very ripe plantains into very thin slices using a mandolin, or you can use a kitchen knife, and then you just toss it with some lime juice and some chili powder, and they turn out so great. My husband loves these, they're his favorite. 2 weeks ago, me and my son did about, I don't know, like 20 yellow onions. We dehydrated those. I could eat these as a snack. They're absolutely delicious. And then if you ground them down even finer, like in a blender or like a bullet or something, you can make your own onion powder. This is great on top of soups and salads and stuff like that to add a little sweetness and a little onion flavor. I also dehydrate my own teas. This is lemongrass that I've harvested from my own backyard. Makes great teas. You could also use it in oils and salves and soaps and those kinds of things as well, and it smells amazing. I also dehydrate my own lemon balm. From my garden, and this with a little bit of mint from my garden is one of my family's favorite teas that we make. It's great as an iced tea, it's great as a hot tea, and it's very, very good for you. I've also, when things go on sale at the grocery store, or I see a good sale on something at the farmer's market, I'll grab that up as well. Like this is a bunch of cherry tomatoes that we did, and sometimes I just eat these as a snack. They taste like candy, really, to be honest with you. They're sweet and they're sour. They're also great. You could put these in olive oil, and it would be just like the sun-dried tomatoes that you get at the store. What we did last night is there was actually a sale on orange bell peppers. So I bought about 20 of them for about $5, and we've cut a bunch of them up and froze them for like stoplight peppers for like fajitas or like quiches or stuff like that. But I also decided to dehydrate some because I always love the way things turn out in the dehydrator. And this was in at about 135 degrees for about 16 hours, and they are so sweet. I've never dehydrated the bell peppers before. I think they turned out really good. So once they're dehydrated, all you have to do is make sure that they don't contain any moisture. I usually put them in a mason jar and leave them just slightly open. That way I can monitor it for a couple days to make sure there's not one in there that maybe has some moisture in it. You might see some condensation on the glass, but the main thing is the sound. It wants to sound clean. It should be making a lot of rattling noises whenever it's in the can. And then after I'm very sure that there's no moisture in that jar, then I don't have a problem just kind of locking it up tighter. The dehydration method will last for a little while, but if it's compromised by any moisture, then it would just spoil very quickly. But that is an option. I did get this one off of Amazon. It's called the Kasori. It's worked fine for me. It wasn't the most expensive one, wasn't the cheapest one either. Has a great capacity. I think there's like 7 shelves in here. 6 shelves in here, and I just cut my own parchment paper pieces to fit in here so that I don't have to clean the racks every single time that I use it. but it's one of my favorite things to do. We usually always have something going in here, and like I said, we make a lot of our snacks in here. Dehydrated apples, dehydrated bananas, dehydrated fruits and vegetables all day long, and we love it. It's definitely worth the investment, but you can, like I said, you can also Google it and figure out how to do it in your own oven, because ovens will do that as well. So another preservation method that you may or may not be familiar with is fermentation. So most people understand this as pickles or pickling. The traditional types of vinegar pickles that you get at the grocery store, that's not really fermented. That's just been soaking in vinegar, which is a preservation method, and vinegar is fermented. But one of the ways that you do fermentation is lacto-fermentation, and that is done with salt, and that's traditionally done with pickles, like big fat pickles, German style pickles, and then also in sauerkraut as well. Most people make these in crocks. I actually make them in half-gallon mason jars, I, for example, with the sauerkraut, super easy. I really like doing it with red cabbages, but this time I did it with a green cabbage, which turns a little white, more like a traditional sauerkraut. Cut it up into pieces, and then you sprinkle salt on it. And there is a ratio of salt to weight of cabbage that you can look up online. I just kind of eyeball it because I've been doing it for so long. And then you really squish all the cabbage together. And when you're squishing it all together, it releases a lot of the juices, and then you pack it down, and you really want to pack it down into a jar to where the fluid that it creates comes up over it. And then you leave it out on your counter for a couple of days, and it starts to ferment and become sour. And then once it reaches the state of sour that you like, then you throw it in the refrigerator, which slows it down just like it does with the sourdough. And then you have sauerkraut. And I never buy sauerkraut from the store. I always make it anytime I've given it away to some of my friends. They've always really liked it, and it seems very fancy and mysterious to them, but it's just salt and cabbage. I also do what my grandmother used to call like easy pickles or refrigerator pickles. I did them with some dill and green beans from our garden. And I just chopped up green beans from our garden, put some of my pickling spices that I keep in there, and then some apple cider vinegar. I really like apple cider vinegar pickles. They taste very caramely, and you can't buy those at the store, so I make them, and these are just quick refrigerator pickles. Same thing. This is okra and garlic and cucumbers from our garden, and I just put it with the pickling spices in the refrigerator, and this will store for a really long time. You eat some of it, we put some more in, and just keep it going. So another preservation method that's pretty common that most people, even people that don't live on homesteads, do is canning. So there's two different kinds of canning. There's bath canning and there's pressure canning. Bath canning is probably what you saw your grandma do. You take fruits and vegetables, you follow a recipe. Definitely recommend the Ball, any of the Ball books. Ball is the authority on canning in the United States, and I would follow all their instructions to a T so that you don't create any kind of monsters that might make yourself sick or your family sick. But you just take whatever you're doing, put it in here, and then you put it in a water bath and you boil it for a certain amount of time. The air is pushed out and the lids seal, and then you label them and put them up for storage. Then you can do that for all fruits, anything that has acidity to it. There's even some ways where you can add some acidity to it so that it is safe to eat for long-term shelf storage. It's a very long-term, whereas the dehydration will get you so far. This will get you probably 2 to 3 years worth of use, depending on your recipe and how well you've done it, done the canning process. Now on things that are low acid, that would be like meat, green beans, beets, celery, carrots, those kinds of things. Those definitely have to be canned in a pressure canner. Now, I'll be honest with you, I've only done pressure canning about 3 times. I do it outside. I'm terrified of it. I even keep my dogs away from it because it scares me so bad. I'm sure it's not scary, but it does make a hell of a lot of noise and seems very, very dangerous. But if I can do it, you can do it. And I hope we do some more of that this year. It is a little bit of an investment to buy a pressure canning machine. And you have to have the right type of stove, and you have to have, you know, the know-how of how to work with a pressure canner like that. I didn't get a very expensive one. I got, I would say, a lower end one. I think it's called Presto or something like that. But it pressure cans just like anything else, and you're able to can those low acid foods. So that's definitely another way, and this is probably one of the more accessible way, the bath canning. As long as you have jars and you have a recipe to follow and you have a big pot, you could be canning any high acid foods. Jellies, jams, fruit, a lot of fruit, and then a lot of tomatoes, as long as you add citrus acid to it. So that's definitely another good way of doing food preservation when you're just getting started out.